A week before my daughter's wedding, she looked me in the eye and told me the best gift I could give her was my death. And in the terrifying, crystalline silence that followed, I didn't feel a thing. The room didn't tilt, my heart didn't break, it simply stopped. And in that perfect, void-like calm, I realized she was right. The mother she wanted to bury the placid, funding-shaped ghost of a woman deserved to die. But I wasn't going to the grave. I was going to the bank. And I was taking her entire future with me. They say the quietest people house the loudest storms. For 6 to 5 years, my storm was a silent, swirling tempest of duty and disappointment, held behind a dam of good manners and better sweaters. It took just one sentence from my own daughter to shatter that dam. And when the flood came, I made sure it carried away her entire world. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 40 years, I was a ghost in my own life. I lived in the long, polished shadow of my husband, Arthur, a man whose voice was a gavel and whose affection was a transaction. Our home was a museum of his success, and I was its chief curator, silent, efficient, and expected to be on display only when needed. Sarah, our daughter, was the one sparkling exhibit we both adored, the one thing we got right. Or so I thought. Arthur left me with 2 things: a fortune that felt like blood money for a life half lived, and a freedom I had no idea how to use. Sarah, by then a vibrant woman of 38, saw my inheritance not as my liberation, but as her birthright. She became my financial advisor, my energetic, demanding guide into a world of investments and portfolios. I was happy to let her. It felt like a connection, the only language we seemed to speak anymore. The first crack appeared a year ago. She brought home Julian. He was all polished teeth and empty eyes, a man who spoke in venture capital and looked at me as if I were a piece of furniture that might need to be appraised for resale value. I saw the hunger in his gaze when he toured Army Home. Sarah was blind to it, intoxicated by his attention. "He's a visionary, Mother," she'd gush, her hand on his arm. "He sees potential everywhere." I knew what that meant. He saw the potential of my money, the potential of this house, the potential of a life funded by a docile, aging mother. The wedding planning was a grand opera of excess. A venue I'd never seen, a dress that cost more than my first car, a guest list populated by Julian's associates. I was relegated to the role of silent financier. My opinions were met with patronizing smiles. "Don't worry your head about it, Mother. Julian and I have it handled. Just write the checks." And I did. Like a good ghost, I drifted through the preparations, signing away pieces of my future to build a stage for their avarice. The largest check was for the house. Not just any house. A monstrous, glass and steel cliffside masterpiece that Julian had designed. My money was to be the foundation, literally and figuratively. The initial transfer was $1 million a down payment to secure my daughter's place in Julian's cold, modern world. The final act of our familial play came 1 week before the wedding. I had made the mistake of suggesting, timidly, that the floral arrangements were a bit extravagant. We were in her apartment, a sleek, sterile box that felt more like a hotel suite than a home. The air was thick with the scent of expensive candles and impending conflict. "Extravagant?" Sarah snapped, whirling on me. Her face, so like Arthur's in its unyielding lines, was contorted with impatience. "This is my wedding, Mother. Not a church potluck. This is the most important day of my life." "I know, darling, I just thought that's the problem." She cut me off, her voice a shard of glass. You think with your dusty, old-fashioned, small-minded sensibilities. You have no concept of vision, of legacy." I felt the familiar shrink, the instinct to fold into myself and apologize. But something held me rigid. A lifetime of folding had left permanent creases in my soul. I simply meant that the money could be used for something more lasting, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. The money, she hissed, the word dripping with venom. It always comes back to the money with you, doesn't it? You cling to it like a security blanket, too scared to live a real life. You just sit in that big, empty house, a sad little woman surrounded by the ghosts of what she never had the courage to be. The words hit with the force of physical blows. They were true, and that was what made them so lethal. Sarah, that's enough, I whispered. No, it's not enough. It will never be enough. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing with a hatred I had never seen directed at me. You know what, Mother? You want to know what the best wedding gift you could possibly give me would be? She paused, letting the silence stretch, a cruel stage pause. Then she delivered the line that shattered my world and built a new one from its ruins. The best gift would be if you just died. Then I could finally stop managing your fragile feelings and your hoarded cash and actually live my life. The room did not spin. It did not go dark. Instead, it became preternaturally clear. I could see every pore on her furious face, every dust mote dancing in a sliver of afternoon sun. The hum of the refrigerator was a deafening roar. In that crystalline moment, the ghost of Eleanor Vance vanished. Someone else looked out from behind my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply looked at her, my expression as unreadable as a calm sea. I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, perhaps expecting the tears, the collapse she was so used to commanding. Instead, I picked up my purse, a sensible leather thing Arthur had bought me 2 decades ago. Very well, Sarah, I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. I understand perfectly. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with a soft, definitive click, the sound of a book closing, the sound of a life ending. I drove home in that same eerie calm. The storm was no longer swirling. It had been unleashed, but it was a storm of pure, cold purpose. She wanted me to die? I would oblige her, but not in the way she imagined. The Eleanor she knew, the mother, the financier, the ghost would cease to exist. The first part of the execution was financial. I sat at Arthur's massive mahogany desk, the one he'd always forbidden me from using, and I logged into our joint accounts. Our accounts that had legally been solely mine for 5 years. With a few clicks, I initiated a wire recall. I pulled the $1 million down payment for the Cliffside house back from the developer's account. The confirmation email arrived within the hour. Transaction reversed. Next, I liquidated everything. I called my private banker, a man named Robert, who had always dealt with Arthur but now had to deal with me. My voice was firm, unwavering. Robert, I want to close the investment portfolio managed by my daughter, Sarah Vance, liquidate all assets and transfer the cash to my high-yield savings account. Today, Mrs. Vance. That's quite unorthodox. There will be significant penalties. May I ask why? You may not, I said pleasantly. Consider it a sudden change of heart, a final whim. I could hear the stunned silence on the other end of the line. As you wish, madam. Next, I called the renowned Winslow Art Gallery. I had a collection, you see. Not of my choosing, but Arthur's. He bought art as a tax shelter and a status symbol. There was a particular piece, a small, exquisite landscape by a revered deceased local artist that Sarah had coveted since she was a girl. She called it her inheritance. Arthur had always promised it to her. Margaret, I said to the gallery owner, a woman I'd taken tea with for years, I'd like to sell the entire collection, immediately, a private, bulk sale. Yes, including the Alistair painting. I'm sure the Wentworth Museum would be interested. Offer it to them at a 10% discount, with the condition the sale is finalized within 48 hours. The deed to the house was next. I would not leave it to her. I would not sell it. I contacted a national land trust. I signed over the deed, the house and its 5 acres of prized real estate to be converted upon my departure into a public park and community garden. A place for children to play and for flowers to grow, 2 things I had never had enough time for. Over 3 days, I systematically dismantled the empire of Arthur Vance. I was a surgeon, cutting away the cancer of expectation and entitlement. I closed bank accounts, transferred funds, and signed documents. The money, all of it, was consolidated and then transferred again to a numbered offshore account I had quietly established years before, a secret act of rebellion I'd never had the courage to use until now. When the financial corpse was clean, I packed a single suitcase. I did not take photographs. I did not take heirlooms. I took practical clothes, my passport, and a small locked wooden box that contained the only things that truly mattered. Then, I sat down to write. Not a long, emotional letter. That would have been a plea, and I was done pleading. This was a statement of facts. A final ledger. On her pristine white marble kitchen table, the centerpiece of her sterile life, I left 3 items. The first item, a single, glossy, 8x10 photograph. It was of me, at 24, sitting on a sun-drenched wall in Santorini. My head was thrown back in laughter, my hair wild in the wind. In the corner of the photo, you could just see the arm of the man who took it, Roberto, the Italian painter I had met and fallen in love with during my one summer abroad before my life was commandeered by Arthur. The man I had left for a future that felt secure, instead of one that felt like living. Sarah had never seen this photo. She had never seen me look like that, truly, joyfully alive. The second item, a bank statement, not mine. It was a printout for a savings account under the name Eleanor Rose. The balance was $12,478.33. It was the total of the housekeeping money Arthur had doled out to me for 40 years. The money for groceries, for utilities, for my clothes. Every month I had skimmed a little, saved a little. This was my secret fund, my escape money. The money that proved that for 4 decades, a part of me had always planned to red away. The third item, a simple, typewritten note on my personal stationery. It contained no salutation and no signature. The ghost you wish dead is gone. The funds you managed have been reallocated. The house you expected is now a public park. The art you coveted has been sold to the Wentworth Museum. The life you sought to build on my grave has no foundation. I have taken my money, my freedom, and my face from the photograph, and I am finally, truly, living. I suggest you try it. You will find it is considerably more difficult without a fortune to stand on. P.S. The Alistair painting fetched $1.2 million. I hope the thought of it hanging in a public gallery, forever out of your reach, brings you as much comfort as the memory of it once brought you. I placed these 3 items neatly in the center of her table. The photograph on top, so it would be the first thing she saw. My laughing, youthful, unforgivable face. Then I walked out of my house for the last time. I did not look back. I got into a taxi, went to the airport, and bought a one-way ticket to Naples. The destruction was not immediate. It was a slow, creeping collapse, and I watched it from a world away, with a detached, clinical satisfaction. I am sitting now on a small terrace overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea. The air smells of salt and lemon blossoms. Roberto, now a widower with kind eyes and paint still permanently under his fingernails, brings me a glass of local wine. He found me, or I found him. It wasn't difficult. Some threads, no matter how long buried, are never truly cut. Through a private investigator I hired to monitor the fallout, my one final indulgence in petty theater, I received reports. The developer, enraged by the withdrawn funds, had not only canceled the Cliffside House contract, but had sued Julian for breach and reputational damage, citing his unstable financial backing. The lawsuit was public and messy. The wedding was canceled, of course. The venue, the caterers, the florist, they all sued for breach of contract. With my accounts empty and my assets gone, Sarah and Julian were personally liable. Julian, it turned out, was all leverage and no real capital. He left her within a month, his vision having evaporated along with my money. My farmer friends, aghast at the public park conversion and the sale of the art, painted her as a monstrous daughter who had driven her poor, gentle mother to such a desperate, final act. She was socially ostracized, a pariah among the very circles she had worked so hard to enter. The final report was the one I had been waiting for. The investigator included a grainy, long-lens photograph. It was of Sarah, leaving her apartment building. She was hunched against the rain, her face gaunt and aged. She was carrying a cardboard box. She looked, for the first time in her life, small and real. She had gotten her wish. The mother she knew, the one she could manipulate, the one whose money was a tap she could turn on at will, the one whose life was a resource to be mine was dead and gone. I lift my wineglass to the setting sun. I think of the photograph on her table, my face frozen in a joy she never knew I was capable of. I had left her with the truth. That I had always been a person, with a secret fund and a secret love and a secret strength, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The best gift a mother can give her daughter, after all, is a lesson. I had given her the ultimate one. I had taught her the true cost of things. And I had finally, blessedly, given myself the gift of life. The silence that surrounds me now is not the silence of a ghost, but the deep, resonant quiet of peace, earned and absolute. The quiet here is a living thing. It's not the dead, hollow silence of Arthur's house, but a symphony composed of buzzing bees, the distant clang of a goat's bill, and the gentle sigh of the sea far below. For the first few months, I would wake up expecting the weight of 1,000 obligations to crush me. Instead, there was only the sun, painting the whitewashed wall of my small cottage in shades of gold. Roberto lives in the village proper, but he spends his afternoons here, at my little table under the lemon tree. We don't speak of the past 40 years. We speak of light and color and the way the shadows fall on the hills in the late afternoon. He is teaching me the paint again, something I abandoned when I traded my smock for a string of pearls. The first time my brush touched the canvas, my hand shook. Now it is steady. I am not painting masterpieces. I am painting the feeling of the sun on my skin. It is enough. My investigator, a discreet Englishman named Alistair, sends his reports via encrypted email. I read them not with schadenfreude, but with the detached curiosity of a biologist observing a species she once belonged to. The collapse of Sarah's life was not a single explosion, but a structural failure, each beam getting way in a precise sequential order. The first report detailed the immediate aftermath of my disappearance. Sarah, initially, had assumed it was a dramatic stunt. She had arrived at my house, Julian in tow, expecting to find me weeping or, at the very least, ready to negotiate. She found a lockbox. The land trust had already changed the locks and posted a notice of future public use on the door. Her key no longer worked. According to Alistair's sources, a chatty real estate agent who knew everyone's business, Sarah had stood on the manicured lawn, the lawn she had played on as a child, the long she had expected to inherit, and screamed my name. It was not a scream of concern, but of pure, undiluted fury. Julian had been on the phone with his lawyers, his voice a frantic, rising crescendo. The funds are gone. No. Gone. Vanished. It's a wire to a holding company in the Caymans. We can't touch it. The second report was the legal fallout. The developer's lawsuit against Julian was just the beginning. The canceled wedding vendors, a small army of entitled artists and purveyors of luxury, descended like vultures. The florist alone sued for $80,000. Without my capital to shield them, their combined assets were a puddle against a forest fire. Julian's credit was obliterated. His visionary firm, built on smoke and mirrors and the promise of my backing, collapsed within weeks. He was last seen loading a rental car with his expensive suits before dawn. Sarah was left holding the bag. The bag was empty, but it was monstrously heavy. She was evicted from her sleek apartment, the rent for which had been quietly subsidized by a monthly transfer from my account to transfer that had abruptly ceased. Alistair's third report included photographs. They were grainy, taken from a distance, but they told a more potent story than any financial document. One showed Sarah leaving a discount supermarket, her shoulders hunched, carrying a single, reusable bag. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweatshirt clothes I had never seen her in. The uniform of the commoner. Another showed her waiting at a bus stop, staring at a cracked smartphone. The image was a perfect inversion of the life she had known. She was now the ghost, haunting the edges of the world she once commanded. The social death was, I suspect, more painful than the financial one. Margaret from the art gallery, a woman Sarah had considered a friend, had been the one to break the news about the Alistair painting. It was now the centerpiece of the Wentworth's modern wing, with a small plaque acknowledging the generous bequest of the late Eleanor Vance. The late. That word must have felt like a nail in her coffin. My social circle, the blue-blooded matrons who had tolerated Sarah for my sake, now closed ranks. She was not just a victim of circumstance. She was the daughter who had so cruelly driven her gentle mother to a premature end. She was untouchable. But the report that truly captivated me was the most recent. Alistair, with his dogged persistence, had managed to learn what happened to the 3 items I left on her table. The photograph of me in Santorini, he discovered, she had not destroyed. She had framed it. It sat on the cheap IKEA dresser in her small, rented room. Why? Was it a reminder of her failure? A totem of her hatred? Or was it, perhaps, the first flicker of understanding? The first time she was forced to look at me not as mother, the function, but as Eleanor, the person? Alistair couldn't say. But the fact that she kept it was the first unpredictable thing she had done. The bank statement for the Eleanor Rose account, however, she had destroyed. Shredded, then burned in a metal trash can behind her building. The existence of that account, my secret, decades-long act of quiet rebellion, was an indictment she could not bear. It proved that the docile woman she thought she knew was a fiction. It proved I had a soul she had never bothered to look for. And the note? The typewritten, merciless note. She had taken it to a forensic document analyst, spending what little money she had left to prove it was a forgery, that I had been coerced, that it wasn't my voice. The analyst's conclusion was unequivocal. The paper was from my personal stationery, the typewriter was my old Olivetti, and the phrasing was consistent with my writing style. It was, undeniably, from me. This, Alistair noted, seemed to break her more than anything else. The final, irrefutable proof that my actions were deliberate, calculated, and born of a clarity she had never afforded me. Here, my life began to grow, while hers shrank to a single small room. Roberto and I travel now. We take his old, rattling Fiat along the coast, eating at dockside tavernas where the fish is bought from the boats that morning. I have a tan. My hands, once soft and idle, are now marked with paint and the small nicks and calluses of a life lived manually. I am, for the first time since I was that laughing girl in the photograph, real. I thought my work was done. I had executed my geometric proof of liberation, each step leading inexorably to the QED of my freedom. But life, unlike revenge, is not a closed system. A new email from Alistair arrived this morning. The subject line was simple: a development. I opened it with a steady hand. He wrote that Sarah had gotten a job. Not a high-powered career, but a job. She was a receptionist at a small, struggling architectural firm. The irony was not lost on me. She was answering phones, scheduling appointments, and making coffee for men not half as clever as she was, in a field her former fiancé had disgraced. And then, the final line of Alistair's report. She has, on 2 occasions, been observed visiting the public park that was once your home. She does not walk there. She simply sits on a bench and looks at the house. I close my laptop. The sun is warm on my face. The lemon tree is heavy with fruit. I think of her, sitting on that bench, looking at the house that is no longer a monument to wealth, but a gift to the city. A place for children to play. Is she feeling regret? Rage? Or is she, finally, seeing the ghost of the mother she thought she knew, and realizing she was never really there at all? The aftermath is not a clean ending. It is an ongoing story. I have sown salt in the soil of her life, and I am content to watch what, if anything, chooses to grow there. As for me, I am no longer Eleanor Vance, the ghost. I am Eleanor, the woman who paints. And for now, that is more than enough. The lesson is complete, but the learning, it seems, has just begun for both of us.